Good morning. Okay, ready, good people? Ready? Okay, class is on. Class is on. Okay, here we go. All right, good morning. Welcome to official Friday, last day of the week, day before the long weekend. Everybody remembers the long weekend, right? Okay, usually students are on top of that, but I just want to make sure. I wouldn't want you to come in on Monday because that would be tragic. Wouldn't that be the worst? Like show up and then school's locked. You would have gotten out of bed got dressed for nothing.
I've actually done that before.
You haven't done that before?
I've done that before.
You have done it before?
Yeah.
Oh, must have been the worst.
Yeah, probably was.
Anyone else ever done that? I'm not sure if I've ever done that or not.
It sucked because it was Monday. And school starts at 7:30 in the morning in Singapore.
Ooh.
So I got there around like 7.
Why does it start so early?
Because it ends a bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
Usually it ends around 2.
Okay. Maybe it's cooler in the morning.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And once about like 10 p.m. then it hits the.
But I guess everything's air conditioned, right?
No.
No?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Not till you get to uni. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that must be.
It sucks.
It must be really hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the humidity as well.
Yeah, it makes you sleepy, right?
No, it just makes you kinda. But
Yeah.
most of the time, it just makes you feel achy. And you just start sweating for no reason.
Right.
And like once you get to like I think your third year of high school, you have to wear long pants. It's a must.
Right. So everyone's just
Yeah.
sweating like crazy. Oh. Well, you probably won't have that problem here.
Oh no, I haven't.
I don't think it'll get nearly hot enough. Although the last few summers actually here have been pretty warm. Maybe not by Singaporean.
I think it's the humidity that does it for me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't mind the heat, it's just the humidity is the killer.
It certainly gets reasonably humid here sometimes.
I don't think it'll get as humid as
No. Not, you know, by your standards, it won't be humid at all.
Oh, yeah.
By my standards, it is. But I'm Canadian, right? So, and I come from a dry province, so. Okay, so let's jump in here. So Unadi is here. Good morning to you. Let's go here. So yesterday we were talking about the Roaring Twenties, right? I don't know. We're only into, this is the 1920s. We're only just started the 2020s. But would you say these 20s are roaring?
Not for the past 2 years.
No. What would you? How would you describe the current 2020s?
Probably meow.
Meow?
Yeah.
Or just a little.
A little purr.
Okay. Yeah, probably pretty quiet so far, right? It's been, yeah, we're not off to a great start so far. There was
Not at all.
wildfires and coronavirus and Donald Trump and
Almost World War III.
almost World War III, murder hornets. Yeah, like it's been a bust. But anyway, the 1920s were not, right? The 1920s were a lot of fun, a lot of excitement. You know, it wasn't good for everybody. And certainly we're talking about the United States here, and probably Canada too. So, you know, not everywhere in the world was doing fantastic. But for the Americans, they were, right? Their economy was flying high. They just finished with World War I, where, you know, they didn't really suffer any losses. No fighting took place in the US, so nothing was destroyed. And in all honesty, they probably made a lot of money because of it. Because unfortunately, you know, war can be good business for you if you're, you know, appropriately positioned. And so the war was good for the US, right? They made lots of money, their economy was flying. And yesterday we talked about some of the ways in which that was happening, right? So the 20s is important because it was the beginning of the modern, what they call the modern consumer age. So today, if we look at a lot of our economic activity, it's stuff that we don't need but we want, right? And so we buy, you know, computers and electronics and gaming consoles, fashionable clothing, fancy, well, some of us buy fancy cars if you can afford that sort of thing. I cannot, but fancy cars, all kinds of stuff. The malls are full of things for you to buy, right? And again, prior to the 1920s, it wasn't really like that. People didn't have a lot of extra income. If they had extra, they saved it for a rainy day. And they're just, you know, most of the economic activity was things that people needed, right? Food, clothing, their shelter, you know, things for their job. That was kind of it, right? Spending was kind of low. But this period of history ushers in a new type of economy where there's huge amounts of money being spent on things that people want, not things that people need, right? So you see people buying cars really for the first time. Cars are brand new. Prior to the 1920s, they were wildly expensive and only the rich could afford them. But Henry Ford, who, and we'll see this in the film, Henry Ford creates an assembly line for his cars, and thus he brings the cost down of the car to the point where, you know, relatively normal people can afford them, and everybody starts to buy them. We see things show up on the market like refrigerators and vacuum cleaners and washing machines and irons to iron take the wrinkles out of your clothes. Again, we're all used to these things, right? Is there anything more is there anything more boring than a washing machine?
A dryer.
Maybe, right? Yeah, even more yeah. My partner and I are looking for a new washing machine currently. We're going to buy one. And we're looking through, like we're going, you know, we're on the internet and we're looking at websites and models and things like that. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more boring than shopping for a washing machine. It's the worst. It's not exciting. They all look the same. It's not going to be any fun to use, right? And so it's the worst. Is the worst thing to shop for. And you're going to have to pay like hundreds of dollars for it. Anyway. However, in the 20s, this was exciting, right? Because people never had them before. And women who were still in the household were promised that this would make their lives much easier, right? Because they could just throw the clothes in the washing machine and turn it on and then go do something else, right? They didn't have to scrub away at clothes in a tub of water, right? So there was all these new kind of gadgets. You probably don't care about this, but I'll say it anyway. Believe it or not, my dad can actually remember a time when a guy used to come up his street when he was quite young. A guy used to come up his street and deliver blocks of ice with a cart pulled by a horse because, again, people didn't have electric refrigerators. To keep your food cold, you would put a chunk of ice in the refrigerator. And so I don't know if have you ever seen such a thing? No, neither have I. But he still remembers a time when, a guy would come to your house maybe every couple of days or few days and give you a brand new big chunk of ice in your ice box, which is sometimes what we call refrigerators, to keep them cold, right? And so here we have the first electric fridges, right, to keep your food fresh. Telephones, people start to have telephones as they wire up cities for communications. Again, before this, nobody had these kinds of things. Radios, hugely important. We may talk about radio a little bit later, maybe next week. Fashion, if you're interested at all in fashion, the fashion industry really gets started in the 1920s, right? Before, people had work clothes and then they had their Sunday clothes, right? The clothes that they wore to church. But after this, things become fashionable, right? You buy clothes just because you think they look nice. And we'll see the growth of spectator sports as well. So again, things that we take for granted now, like football or basketball or hockey or whatever you're into, those weren't a big deal before 1920. Do you have any idea why, let's say, why those big sports weren't very big at the time? Hey, Mark. What's that? Yeah, there were no broadcasts, right? So if there was a basketball game on, the only people who saw the basketball game were the people who were actually there. There was no other way to know about the game until you saw it in the newspaper the next day, and then you would know who won and who lost. But when people start buying radios, now you can listen to the game. Obviously, it's much better to watch it, right? But you could actually listen to it in real time as it's happening. Exciting. Right. So, just a couple of, primary sources from the time, right? This is the cover of of Life magazine. I don't think they publish Life anymore. But you can see these 1920s people having a good time, right? Dancing, they're all dressed up in their fancy clothes, having a blast, right? You see lots of this kind of stuff as well. Nowadays, we live in a world that there's advertising everywhere, is there not? Yeah, right? It's on the internet, it's on websites, it pops up before YouTube videos, you see it beside the road, you see it at the SkyTrain station, on the bus, everywhere, right? People are trying to sell you stuff everywhere you look. Prior to 1920, it wasn't quite so bad, but the advertising industry gets started at this period of history. And so here's a couple of ads from the 1920s, right? Here you can see one for oats. They make kids husky. I guess husky was what they wanted their kids to be in the 1920s. And here, on the right, probably a pretty shocking ad where we have a doctor recommending cigarettes to you because they are less irritating. That's the one doctor, when you hear on the TV like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this. This is the one who's like you know,
The one.
totally, totally off base and recommending horrible things.
Then it was encouraged, right?
Yeah, because smoking was cool, right? Smoking was something that everybody did. Cigarettes were cheap because they weren't really taxed by the government the way they are now. People, you know, either didn't know about the health risks or didn't take them seriously, and so yeah, lots more people smoked in the 1920s than they do today. Um, yeah, yeah, smoking was very, very common. And even amongst young people, I mean, I think a lot of people would probably start smoking around maybe 15 or 16. Yeah, for sure. And maybe even earlier, depending on. I used to work in Russia, and I saw, one day I was on the bus, and I was on the bus came to a bus stop, and I looked out the window, and there's this, like, probably 9-year-old kid or maybe 10-year-old kid just smoking a cigarette at the bus stop, and smoking it like, you know how you can tell when people smoke when they've smoked for a long time? They just, you know, their gestures are really fluid, and his were like, he looked like he'd been smoking for years, and I was like, oh, it's just so wrong, so wrong. But yeah, but again, it, you know, it wasn't such a big deal in the 20s. People didn't really know about the health effects, and it was cool. Everybody did it, right? Everybody did it.
There was a video that went around a few years back of this, like, I think, I want to say 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
That was like smoking a few packs a day or something.
Oh my God, that's not good. That's so not good for you. Well, I'm sure that kid will regret it when he becomes an old man at
Well, apparently
45.
He quit when he was like 11 or something.
He what?
He managed to quit when he was like 11 or 12.
Man, that must have been rough. Can you imagine how difficult it is to quit smoking when you start smoking when you're 5? Yikes.
He got really fat, so I think he found another outlet.
Oh, okay, he replaced it with food.
Yeah.
Okay, poor guy. This is the assembly line that I was talking about, and we might see some footage of it in the documentary. So again, this was Henry Ford's big innovation, right? He put cars on a line, and he got his workers to do just one job, right? And so maybe your job was to just bolt the wheels on, right? Or maybe you just put this one part on the car. And again, it became much easier to train factory workers, and it increased production, right? And so cars are still kind of built that way today, right? They're built on an assembly line with more robots than there used to be, of course, but this is a big innovation, not only the car itself, but the manufacturing technique that Henry Ford uses. And you know, Ford becomes very wealthy and influential because of this. Everybody's driving Fords in this period, right? They're very popular. There's tons and tons of them. I don't have a statistic, but I think the documentary does, and they talk about how many cars Ford sells, and it's a huge number, hugely popular. The other thing you'll see here show up at the time is credit. And so again, before the 1920s, if you wanted to buy something, you just saved up your money. And when you had enough money, then you bought it. Don't have enough money, you're not buying it, right? So it was very simple prior to this period. But here in the 1920s, we see the beginnings of credit. You can make monthly payments, right? Buy now, pay later. And of course, we're all very familiar with that kind of arrangement, right? That's just how you buy things now, right? You use credit cards, you get a mortgage, you get a car payment, you buy a phone, but you get the phone for free because they work it into your phone bill, right? We're very used to this, but in the 1920s, it's brand new. And here you can see, this is General Motors actually, telling how many cars that they have sold on credit. Is that 1.1 million cars? Or is that dollars? Number of cars and trucks bought from 1919 to 1925 on credit through General Motors Acceptance Corporation. So they sold They sold 1.1 million cars, just General Motors cars, and just on credit. So you can imagine how many cars are being sold, especially when you factor in Ford, who was much more popular than General Motors. So millions and millions of cars are being sold, right? Suddenly, everyone wants one, and a lot of people can afford them. Most people can afford them, right? Huge change. Also imagine, we may see this in the video too, but imagine how cities change, right? How we kind of build cities when suddenly nobody had a car before and now everyone has one, right? Totally changes how you plan out a city. Has anyone ever been to like an old city, like a really old city, and the streets are really narrow? Yeah? And like if they have cars, you're like driving your car and it feels like you're scraping the sides with your windows?
Germany streets was like this.
Which were?
In one city in Germany.
Oh yeah. Yeah, probably like a medieval town.
The old days.
Yeah.
There were shoppings and people streets and
Yeah, exactly, right? Cities that were never designed for cars, right? But now cities have to be completely reimagined to accommodate this new technology, right? And not only that, you've got to build wider roads, and you need parking lots, you need traffic lights, you need to create traffic laws, and then you've got to teach them to everybody so that people don't get run over, because people aren't used to looking for cars in 1920, right? Because cars are new. You and I would never step out onto the street without looking now, because we're very used to them. But at the time, people were not, right? They were brand new technology. So again, huge changes are coming with technology, with credit, with people having extra money to spend. There's cultural, economic, political change. All these things are happening in the 1920s, and it's a wild and crazy time. Okay, that said, can we watch some footage? Okay. For online people, I think I just need to, oh no, I did. I put this into Microsoft Teams for you. So if you're online, you can go into Teams. I'm just gonna open up my Teams here. If you're online, you can go into Teams, and in the History 12 channel under Files, you will see a little video file that says the 20s in color, and so that's what we'll be watching. Okay, so I will kind of ask you 3 questions, and I'll post these in Microsoft Teams so that you can see them. But I want you to pay attention to the social and cultural changes that are happening in the 1920s, right? So how is people's social and cultural life changing, right? What kind of new things are happening? Here, what kind of communication and transportation technologies are invented or become common? We may have answered that already, but keep an eye out for it. And this might be interesting too, because is this documentary, I know you haven't seen it yet, but is this documentary a primary source or a secondary one? Primary or secondary? Not primary. Yeah. So the documentary itself is a secondary source, but it's assembled from a bunch of primary sources. So we'll hear some interviews from people who were actually alive at the time. We'll see a lot of video from the period. We'll hear some audio from the period. And so all of those things are primary sources, but they're assembled into this documentary, and that becomes a secondary source, okay? So, but we will hear from some people who were there, and they'll kind of tell us how things were, right? They're old people, like in the interview, they're older folks. And so based on what they say, what can we learn about the sort of beliefs and values at the time? What did people think was important? What did people think was cool or not cool? What did people think was kind of appropriate or not appropriate? What kind of things did people find exciting at the time, right? Or that's kind of where are they coming? Where are these people coming from, right? What do they believe? What do they like? What did they think was cool? What were they afraid of, maybe? Any of those things that kind of come out to you in the process of those interviews. Okay? Cool? All right. So I'm going to put those, let me just do this really quickly here. I'm just going to put those questions into Microsoft Teams. 1920s color. Okay. So questions are in Teams if you need to refer to them. And what we'll do here is we'll watch, what's our timing? 31. Let's watch 20 minutes of it, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've seen. Okay? So, pardon me. Online people, watch 20 minutes of the video. The video is in Microsoft Teams, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what we've seen in terms of these questions. Okay? So we'll see you in just a little bit. And we are back. So, there's some pretty old-timey footage in here, right? Right? Hello? Hi? Yes, right? Old-timey footage. It's kind of a different world, right? Especially, it's shocking to think that that was only 100 years ago, right? And it's, it's such a short period of time. What kind of things did we see in there in terms of social and cultural changes?
Like it's new music, like jazz or rock music.
Yeah, there's new musical styles coming about, right? And musical styles that are like really fast and exciting and made for dancing, and not like, slow waltzes like, Beauty and the Beast do or whatever, but like, dancing that you would do at a nightclub, right? So, the beat is fast and it's lively and exciting. And so, and a lot of that music comes from the American South, right? It comes from black culture. And so as you can see, white musicians will kind of borrow from black musicians. And, of course, that's going to happen over and over again. Rock and roll and blues are kind of borrowed from sort of African American musical traditions. Rap, of course, comes from African American musical traditions, and then it's borrowed by others. And so that's kind of a pattern that happens quite frequently in popular music, but it happens here in the 1920s for sure. What else do we see?
Where is that? And the woman's wearing
Yeah, the women's fashion, how women present themselves to society, that's totally changed, right? Prior to this, women were very conservative. There was no makeup. They weren't very sexualized. The U.S. is a very religious country, right? It was at the time, and it still is. And so women were not sort of portraying their sexuality in public. But here in the 1920s, things get a little crazy, right? Women are, they're out of the home. They have their own jobs. They're in the workforce, and they're kind of expressing themselves, right?
Gone wild.
What's that?
They've gone wild.
The girls have gone wild, right? Like we saw in Social Justice this morning in Mean Girls. The girls have gone wild, right? Shorter skirts that you can see women's ankles and maybe even their knees.
Oh, God forbid.
Shocking, right? Women with short hair. Scandalous, right? Women wearing makeup and smoking. Is this the end of society? But I mean, some of the older generation at that time probably would have thought those things, right? They would have been shocked that women were, wearing these sexualized clothes and wearing makeup and cutting their hair short and smoking and drinking and going to nightclubs. Horrible, right? Horrible things. But again, society is rapidly changing, right? And so it's becoming far less conservative, far more kind of liberal and loose, and again, there's lots of money flying around and partying and all kinds of things. What else do we see?
Prohibition?
Yeah, we see prohibition, right? So there's a couple things going on here. They don't talk about it either in the text or in the movie, but just to make a long story short, Christian women's movements have been pushing for prohibition for a long time. They feel that it will, if you ban alcohol, it'll cut down on crime, it'll cut down on domestic abuse, and it'll increase the productivity of the nation because men won't be, either drunk or hungover all the time. And so they're not wrong. So they kind of keep campaigning for it, and finally, in most of the United States, they manage to succeed and get it banned for a little while anyway. But as we notice, people don't stop drinking; they just kind of find ways around the laws, right? What else do we see? Social and cultural change.
The people who refuse to accept the change.
Oh, right. Some people are pushing back hard, and those are,
KKK.
yeah, the Klu Klux Klan, right? So this is a group that appears basically they appear right after slavery is abolished. So slavery is abolished in 1865 in the United States, but basically as soon as that happens, the KKK appear and form with kind of the idea that they're going to keep black Americans at the bottom of society, right? They may not be slaves anymore, they may be free, but the Klu Klux Klan is going to make sure that they know their place, kind of thing. And so they, they existed at that time. You can see them here kind of appearing when there's a period of social change. They'll show up again when the civil rights movement in the mid-1960s with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, if you're familiar with those gentlemen. And so they'll keep kind of rearing their head at different times. Who else do we see, or what else do we see?
Their collective life by including like they can put more luxury goods products in like cars or like something like radio and
Yeah, their material quality of life is much improved, right? People have things now. They have stuff. They have radios and washing machines and cars and all kinds of things, right? They have consumer goods, and again, that's new. What else? Isn't everyone so well dressed in the 1920s? Everyone's always wearing shirt and dress pants and a fancy hat, and yeah, everyone's so there's nobody walking around in their sweatpants and flip-flops in the 1920s, right? No offense to anyone who likes, those are very comfortable, but nobody's dressed like that. What else?
Many people drink a beer in the bar.
Many people are drinking beer in
In the bar.
yeah, in the bar, yeah. So people like to drink before Prohibition, they like to drink during Prohibition, and they like to drink after Prohibition, right? So again, Prohibition has some success, but really it just drives the liquor trade underground, right? And so we see the mafia, the ones that are sort of supplying alcohol to these places, and there's violence erupting between gangs, which is not a strange concept. It was interesting to see that footage of Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone and Thomas Edison together, right? So Ford obviously is the founder of Ford Automobiles. Do you know who Firestone is, or what Firestone is? Any car guys here? Yeah, Firestone makes tires. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
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 That's Firestone.
Oh.
Yeah, that's him. And do you know who Thomas Edison is?
Yeah.
Who's he?
The light bulb guy?
He's the light bulb guy. He's the guy who invented light bulbs. And so, can you imagine? That's like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates
Of the time.
right? That's them all hanging out together. In the successful inventors of the day, if you will. Right, so we saw all that stuff. Communication and transportation technologies. What do we see? Cars, telephones, radio.
I think that was it.
Yeah,
That
probably.
machines over-
Probably. Air travel starts to become a little more common after this period. We'll see some air travel in the second part of this, I'm pretty sure.
30s or 40s, right?
What's that?
The 30s or 40s, right, is when air travel became.
Yeah, because at this point no plane has actually been able to fly across the ocean. So again, the planes are used in World War I to some sort of effect, but they're not a consumer thing yet. What's that?
Is there like when is the invention of like the train, like steam train?
The steam locomotive?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I'm gonna
I
say
think that was around this time as well, right?
I'm gonna say mid 1800s. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's how they used to travel before train.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I'm gonna say like 1850. Might be wrong. You can Google it if you want and let me know. But I'm gonna say about 1850. Trains are still pretty new. Cars are pretty new. Planes are brand new. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, those cars were something else though, weren't they? They were going over those ruts and through streams and up hills and down hills.
I got anxiety watching it.
I know, me too.
Drive through the river.
Me too, but as they point out, like there really aren't a lot of paved roads yet. You know, like we require nice smooth roads for our cars to drive on, but nobody had smooth roads because nobody had cars.
Imagine how bumpy you like get in the car.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you bounced along in it, you know, squeaking, and you know, I'm sure it was not a smooth ride at all. But I mean, you know, if you're used to a horse carriage, I'm sure it was probably, you know, it was probably very luxurious to just drive along in one of those jalopy things, right? So we haven't really heard anyone interviewed. I wonder if that question is actually related to another documentary I might have shown in the past. But either way, so far some interesting things. Did anything kind of pop out to you, like when you were watching it and you're like, wow, that's weird? Or did anything pop out to you and say, oh, that's not quite so different from modern life?
That the white clothes when the people were like gathering themselves and celebrating something. The white people wore the white.
Oh yeah.
That thing was good.
The KKK?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was similar to today, or it was just shocking.
Yeah, just because.
Yeah, and shocking to see them all marching in Washington, right? 40,000 of them. Unbelievable, right? It was definitely a different time, right? Yeah, that's shocking to see. Anything else? Not really. Yeah, yeah. The pretty severe racism, right? The KKK, the destruction of Greenwood, Oklahoma. That's currently marked. That was June 19th of what was the year? 1923, 24, and it's still marked. And there was a lot of talk about it last year, given the Black Lives Matter movement that was happening. A lot of people,
Oh yeah, 1994.
yeah, focused on Juneteenth. They call it, and so that's kind of the memorial date of this.
Oh, it was around the same time as well.
What's that?
When the whole movement happened, it was around the same time.
Yeah, the
Black Lives Matter movement.
well, you know, the African American community has marked June 19th for decades, right? But a lot more people were paying attention to it in the context of that Black Lives Matter movement. But yeah, it's a historical date, and it's an awful example of racism, right? And where again, you know, the Klu Klux Klan was was there to sort of keep, you know, African Americans at the bottom level of society. And there you can see as well, right? The people of Oklahoma revolt and burn the town because African Americans are, you know, they've risen too high, right? They're too successful. They think they're better than they are, kind of thing. Is that I think how people were feeling, and they, you know, revolted and, you know, in pure sort of racism and hatred, you know, kill people and destroy the town, which is horrendous, right? Anything else? Okay. You want to keep watching? Okay. So we'll watch the end of this documentary. I think that'll probably take us to the end of class. And so what I'll do for online people, I'll end the live stream now. And you can just watch the rest of the documentary, and that'll take us to the end of class, and then we'll pick this up on Tuesday. Okay, so Tuesday.
This is it. Oh, wait,
In,
no, that's
in
not
social
it.
justice. We'll have to talk about the quiz in this class too, but I guess we'll talk about it Tuesday. We'll stagger it a little bit. So yeah, so online people, I'll turn you loose now. Watch the rest of the documentary. Have a good long weekend. No school on Monday, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Okay, so yeah, bye.